Hi, I'm Jenny Brown and a warm welcome to our weekly buy-to-let market update, our penultimate one for this year, I'm afraid to say. Look, I hope everybody's keeping really well. I'm actually quite surprising myself here. I'm actually recording this and it's still dark outside. I'm guessing this shortest day is fast approaching and we'll start to see things lighten up a little bit. But I hope everybody's doing okay and keeping really well. Not a huge amount of news this week, but I will have a couple of interesting things to share with you. So first of all, just focusing on the lender side of the market. TSB have discontinued their 3 and 10 year fixed rate products, but what they have done is introduce some 2-year fixed rates, which they didn't have. And their rates on 2-year fixed pricing are starting from 1.44%. Now, in terms of TSB, they're a really good lender, actually. We don't use them a huge amount because they don't tend to naturally sit within the clients that we tend to mainly deal with. But they are very, very good. They were part of Lloyds Banking Group before they got separated off when all that breaking up of the Lloyds Banking Group happened. But so with TSB, to get a mortgage with these guys, you can have no more than 11 properties in the background. You need to earn £25,000 a year and rental income can't be included within that figure. They will accept applications with people up to age of 70 at the point of application, or actually even 75 if you've got pension income. They accept let to buy, so that's when you're going to be remortgaging your existing property onto a buy-to-let and moving into a different property. And they can accept high-rise flats, ex-local authority blocks, studios and flats over commercials. So some rather nice pieces of lending policy there. Like I say, I think they're a good lender. We don't tend to use them a huge amount because they're really aimed at the more vanilla end of the market. And then the pricing is not necessarily market leading, but actually when we have dealt with them in the past, they've been very, very good. So, great to see those guys bringing out some good competitive 2-year fixed rates. And actually on the remortgage stuff, they do come with free valuation and free legals as well. Also this week, we have seen Fleet Mortgages make a couple of amendments to their lending criteria. So they've reintroduced a maximum loan size of £2 million per property. And this is up from £1.5 million, which they had capped it back down to during COVID. And this is available at a loan to value of 65%, which is available on their standard ranges, so just normal kind of vanilla lending, but also on their limited company buy-to-let ranges as well. Also, what they've done is they have reduced the time the applicant must have owned a buy-to-let property to be eligible for an HMO or multi-unit application. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, most of the lenders who lend on HMOs and multi-units do have a requirement for a certain amount of landlord experience in already. And the reason lenders do this is if you imagine if you've never rented out a property before and then you take on a block of 5 flats, you've gone from no experience to having suddenly 5 of these to manage. So it's quite a baptism of fire. So lenders do prefer to lend to those people with experience. Also because of the more complex licensing and the regulations that sit around these kinds of properties as well. So they prefer experienced people. Not the case for all lenders, I hasten to add. Anyway, so what Fleet have done is they have reduced the amount of time that you need to have had letting experience to be able to access their HMO and multi-unit product range down from 2 years to 1 year. So that's really good. Now, a bit about Fleet Mortgages. Again, not a lender we tend to mention often, primarily because they don't tend to change their pricing very often. But they lend to individuals and limited companies. You can be up to age 89 at the point of application. Now, they do have a minimum income requirement of £15,000 a year, but this can be derived from rental income. This does jump up to £25,000 if you're a first-time landlord. Now, they don't mind how many properties you've got in the background, and you can do remortgages within the first 6 months of owning a property against open market value. They do accept debt access and studio flats, HMOs up to 6 bedrooms and multi-units of up to 10 units. So some really good lending criteria from Fleet Mortgages there. Definitely stronger in the more specialist end of the market. The pricing is certainly not competing with the likes of TSB and the Mortgage Works and those guys. But these guys certainly have a very strong approach to the market and are very, very landlord friendly. So great to see them making some tweaks to their criteria to broaden their appeal, as it were, to landlords. Now, I was reading an article earlier in the week, which I found really interesting and wanted to share with you. So what this article was saying that essentially 2/3 of potential home buyers would now look to move to a house that was better designed for home working. And this is according to a report by Purple Bricks. Now, this is actually really reflected in the conversations that we're having with some of our clients, particularly landlords with HMOs, where they're considering having co-working spaces within the buildings, just really trying to kind of stay aligned to home buyer and tenant requirements. That was really interesting. Now, Purple Bricks went on to say that the national lockdown has transformed home buyer behaviour and priorities. In addition, virtual viewings and use of apps have risen as 4 in 10 homeowners have upped their use of technology during lockdown. I wish I was one of those. Over half, so 51%, would now be happy to try out a virtual viewing, and 42% would be prepared to use an app to help manage the entire sale of a property. Now, data collected by Purple Bricks also shows that 52% of the older generation have ditched the property section in the local paper in favour of apps. Well done now, Silver Surfers. And 1/3 of house hunters would use Google Street View to scout out a new neighbourhood. So I think it's really important if you are, particularly if you're thinking about investing going forwards, but also when you're considering your existing properties, really just looking at behaviour of consumers. And as landlords, you have consumers, i.e. your tenants as well. And so looking at things like having an extra bedroom in a property which could be used as a home office, as an example, is really important. But also it's really interesting to see how the consumer market is actually moving to a much more technology-based kind of approach towards researching and buying properties. Okay, a bit of news for our commercial landlords now, or those who are thinking about acquiring a commercial property. And interestingly, actually, just as an aside, we were looking at some statistics on Google Analytics. So Google publish some data where you can kind of understand what people are looking for and Googling, essentially. There's been a really huge spike in people researching commercial mortgages. And we were anecdotally thinking about what this could mean and why this may be. And we do believe that actually there is definitely an interest from investors in terms of, first of all, acquiring commercial property because it's sort of, perceived to be sort of cheaper and a kind of more vulnerable part of the market at the moment. But also because of the ability to potentially convert these properties into residential under the more relaxed planning laws that we have at the moment. So it's been really interesting to see that the interest in that particular segment of the market is definitely spiking right now. But that's an aside. Essentially what the news article is that business owners affected by pandemics will be protected from eviction. This would be your commercial tenant until the end of March 2021. So Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick has announced that this final extension to protections from the threat of eviction will give landlords and tenants 3 months to come to an agreement on unpaid rent. Now, the government are clear that where businesses can pay any or all of the rent, they should absolutely do so. Now, further guidance to support negotiations between landlords and tenants will also be published shortly. Now, alongside this, Jenrick has also announced a review of the outdated commercial landlord and tenant legislation to address concerns that the current framework does not reflect the current economic conditions. And they say that this review will consider how to enable better collaboration between commercial landlords and tenants, and also how to improve the leasing process to ensure our high streets and town centres thrive as we recover from the pandemic and beyond. So look, let's just watch this space on this. Sounds interesting to be sure. I know that normally when landlords hear that there's some sort of consultation going on, they immediately sort of fear the worst. But let's just wait and see how that lands when more information comes out, and obviously we'll keep you updated as we hear it. And of course, it would not be a weekly update if I didn't include some house price news. Slightly different tone on this one this week. So I was reading a report by Really Moving and their house price forecast. And they are expecting a fall of 1.2% in house prices in January. Now, their forecast also reveals that the average property prices are predicted to continue to fall, dropping by 2.5% in February. Now, furthermore, based on the analysis of purchase data from 30,000 conveyancing quotes, Really Moving believes that the average property price in England and Wales will peak at £352,239 in December, before falling to £343,312 in February 2021. Now, the data also shows that between July and December 2020, the proportion of first-time buyers in the market fell by 12% compared to the period last year. Now, Robert Houghton, Chief Executive of Really Moving, has said that their prediction of a new year change of fortunes for the housing market has been further strengthened by the latest data, which clearly shows price growth entering a downward trend in January and accelerating in February. What he went on to say actually is the mask is beginning to slip on the two-tier housing market of recent months, which has seen activity from equity-rich homeowners who are less affected by the pandemic, concealing problems at the lower end of the market where first-time buyers have benefited little from the stamp duty holiday and face considerable challenge securing high loan-to-value mortgages. The kind of growth we've seen over the last few months was never sustainable. Now, it's a very, very interesting comment that he makes there, particularly around the first-time buyer part of the market. As we all know, first-time buyers are required and absolutely key in the housing market to kind of keep the cycle going and keep things moving along. And whilst the stamp duty news was obviously very, very welcome, actually, a lot of first-time buyers have already fallen out of side of the requirement to pay stamp duty, so it hadn't really benefited them. Now, if you combine this with the reduction, and it has been a reduction, but actually almost a removal of high loan-to-value mortgages that were available pre-COVID that really kind of helped out the first-time buyers. It has been incredibly hard for these guys to move forward with acquisitions. So yes, I think that absolutely Rob Houghton is right to flag up there's been a kind of masking about what's going on in the property market, because actually, yes, of course, home movers and those with plenty of equity are able to kind of make their next step or able to invest in buy-to-lets, but actually the first-time buyer market has taken a real knock, and this ultimately does affect the kind of cycle of the housing market. So yes, let's hope that their predictions are a little bit kind of too cautious or negative, but I think it's fair to say that we all acknowledge that as things start to slow down, the housing market will see a drop in some regions. There you go, that's everything from me this week. Thank you as always for joining us. Next week, please do have a watch of our video. I'm going to be doing a review of the year and a kind of update on where things are right now. It's absolutely fascinating, actually, the questions that we get asked by people. Because we're obviously very much on top of what's going on in the market, we assume that everybody else is as well. But actually, when we speak to clients, there is some real confusion around where the market currently is. Now, obviously, if you're watching these videos on a regular basis, you're really up to speed on things. But hopefully it should prove a really interesting look back over the last 12 months and also some thoughts as to what we're expecting for next year. So that's me for today. It's still dark out. It must be that early today. But yeah, so if you do want to have a chat about any of the things we've discussed today, or anything mortgage related, please do give us a call. 0345 345 6788, or have a nosy on our website. It really is an absolute goldmine of information, mortgagesforbusiness.co.uk. Until then, I will see you next week. Look after yourselves and enjoy the rest of your week.